Thank you very much. And take it away, Joshua and Megumi.
All right, thanks, Ed. I apologize for this, but there's been lots of big changes. First of all, with the paper that we're going to present, and I'm going to push through our talk very quickly so that we can get to a workshop portion. Okay, so I'm going to talk quickly, and I know it's not fun, but I think that will make it more interesting for you. And so you see, our original title was we were going to talk about tolerance of ambiguity and culturally familiar materials. But we realized that the conclusions we came up with and the workshop that we were planning would not be interesting for you, would not be enlightening. So we've gotten rid of that, and we're going to focus on the research design workshop element of this, and we're going to work together. So I'll talk about what we have, what we're working with. Megumi will talk a little bit about what we've done in the past, and then we'll talk about what we want to bring this into the future and in the workshop for the latter half of this presentation. So what do we have? Unlike most people who are in this field, I'm kind of moonlighting in T-cell research, and so we've actually adopted or inherited texts from another project. We have a collection of about 30 folktales. They're Tsugaru, local-based folktales. And what's interesting about this is we have various combinations or various versions of these texts. So we have written in Tsugaru vernacular, recordings of kataribe, folktale tellers, recording in Tsugaru vernacular. We have translations into standardized Japanese. And then for the English side, we have translations into marked English. By that, I mean using literary language and using dialect or dialect-like language. We're working on translations into simple English, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. And also we have and are working on recordings in English as well. So you can compare here. We have transcription of the storytellers in hiragana and standardized translations. And we also have the scripts that the kataribe use themselves. So this is vernacular Japanese, but there's a combination of kanji and kana, which makes it easier easier to understand the content, right? And then for the English versions, we don't have time to play the sound for you, unfortunately, but for the English versions, you can see there's a very oral style to this translation. I use the italics to signify the markedness of so-called dialect and other facets here. On the simple English side, you can see it's much simpler sentence structure, less, more standard vocabulary, etc. And so just as a general benchmark, right, you can see the Flesch-Kincaid readability score is 87.7. In the field of talking about English accessibility, plain English is typically a score of 60, which is 7th grade. So we're aiming for much lower than that. This is about a 3rd grade English score. So this is just to give you a sense of the type of texts that we're working on, that we've collected. Okay, and so you're saying, so what? All right, I think what we have is an interesting opportunity here. So first of all, they are culturally familiar materials, and there's research that suggests that using materials that address Japanese language and Japanese culture, and even on a level of place names, helps to improve student investment, emotional investment, and recall, and has other EFL benefits. There are also local materials. Our university strongly stresses the use of local topics, local meaning within the region, and so that has a benefit for us. It also touches on intralingual translation. This is a very contentious field, topic in the field of translation studies, and a very nascent topic in EFL as well, the use of translation within a single language. So translating between dialect and standardized language. And also the use of parallel text where you're viewing multiple texts at the same time. And these texts are also, I'll put this in air quotes, but they're literary. So rather than being purely pragmatic, communicative English, these are literary in quality. And therefore, right, these qualities can be associated with or can leverage lots of different things. So predictive skills, learner motivation if they have a choice of texts, learner agency if they have a choice of texts, vocabulary skills, translation skills, tolerance of ambiguity with non-standardized language, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what we have here, just to kind of lay it out, is we have these really, we have this large collection of texts set up for an interesting project, but because we don't come at it from the perspective of EFL researchers, right? Primarily, we don't sit and say, all right, we have an interest in defining spoken language outcomes or improving vocabulary retention or something specific like that. We're approaching from a text and now are looking to develop tasks to implement using these texts and to take advantage of their unique qualities. Okay, so I'm going to ask Megumi to talk a little bit about what we did with them.
Thank you, Joshua. What did we do with these texts so far? So, in Joshua's class of advanced level English reading, students read one of 4 Mukashiko stories in marked English and wrote a report summarizing and reacting to it. The students peer-reviewed several papers, and then we summarized their story as part of their final report paper. When looking at their papers, Joshua compared the amount that the students wrote for the story versus an academic article, and saw that students tended to not only write more about the story, but they tended to write significantly more about it than the academic textbook itself. Writing by advanced level students were much better than that of my classes, the lowest beginner level English classes for listening. So that made me very, very jealous. Okay, so I teach beginner level classes, the lowest levels of the first year students in the college, with the proficiency level of that test score average of 452, which is equivalent to average of 391 in terms of TOEIC L&L. So that is the one that in terms of SEFA that Natsumi, Dan, and Jacob talked about, it is the lowest level of A1 or either A2, maybe, possibly. Using a recording of one short story in marked English by Joshua, I experimented with the combination of the 3 different steps of listening and reading exercises. First, I had my students listen to the story in English and then listen to the storyteller's story in Tsugaru-ben dialect. Well, according to Ed, it's not in Japanese maybe, but it is a kind of middle language that bridges students to English and to the standard Japanese. After that, I had them read the marked English version, then they wrote a summary of the short story in English. Okay, so the students reported how well they understood the story using a Likert scale of 1 to 4. It's a subjective self-report, but interestingly, the combination of Tsugaru-ben and reading the English text helped the most students figure out the story. As you can see in this chart, listening to both English and Tsugaru-ben storytelling came in second, as well as some of them who said all 3 methods assisted their interpretation, both coming in second in number, which is 20%. And it appeared to be some good start to investigate further on. Finally, I'd like to briefly touch on a storytelling workshop that we held in March. Together with the storytelling tellers group called Mono Mukashiko and some students volunteers, we organized a workshop combining the storyteller's performance in Tsugaru-ben dialect along with student recitation of the marked English version and invited community members to watch on Zoom. According to our post-event questionnaires, the audience were impressed by the performance of the storytellers and the students' recitations, by the innovative ideas of translating of Tsugaru-ben to English, etc., etc. Among such comments, they suggested that there are common factors between Tsugaru-ben and English expressions, and also that the Tsugaru-ben complemented the understanding of English, while the English also helped them to understand the unfamiliar Tsugaru-ben parts. From the student side, the comments are all narrative and there's no scientific data, but they felt that it was good for their learning English, giving good quotes to the emotions hidden in the vocabulary, because they worked hard in order to perform the recitation well together with the storytellers. The performance itself helped the students' understanding of the language, and the international students said that they could deepen understanding of the local culture and realize that some things transcend the country borders, which is all universal to the human beings. Over to you, Joshua.
All right, thank you, Megumi. So I think you can see we've done a little bit of application using these texts in the classroom, but they've really fallen short of doing any kind of serious research program, right? We're just in the beginning stages here. So what do we want to do? Well, we're looking to design a research program, but it needs to be, for our purposes, it should be action research in the sense that it's integrated into the classes that we're teaching, as and they're providing educational benefit, right? It's not just a test of the texts themselves. And so our very broad research question at this stage is, what combination of texts and tasks can yield significant and interesting outcomes for Japanese L1 EFL learners? Okay, now you saw a little bit with Megumi's tasks in her class, that it's the combination of texts that actually, I think, has some potential to be interesting here. Okay, and so for a very simple example, you can have standardized Japanese and marked English, and that would provide Japanese scaffolding for the goal of, say, comprehension of the marked English. Or you can have simple English to marked English, and that would provide an English language scaffolding for the English text. Or you could have marked English and oral English, where there's either the oral providing performative scaffolding, or maybe the reading providing a textual, text-based scaffolding, right? But these are just 2-unit combinations, right? That's not a whole research program. So you could have longer sequences. We could talk about having synchronic texts that students are looking at multiple texts at the same time versus sequential. Also there's a possibility of applying this to in both directions. So English, teaching English to Japanese learners, but also teaching Japanese to English speakers. And there's some parallels with tolerance of ambiguity in world English in the non-standard language that we're dealing with, connections with literary skills, critical thinking, creative thinking, local topics. So the point is that it's not only strictly language skills, right? When you're talking about literary language and literary study, it opens up a lot of possibility for many more dimensions. So here's one very simple example of a type of program that we could put together, where the one study is broken into multiple cohorts. And if they all begin and end with the marked English text, but each cohort is also exposed to a different text in the middle: simple English, standardized Japanese, oral English. And so in this extremely rudimentary program, you could test for, what kind of scaffolding improves comprehension over the course of these 3 sessions, or what improves memory or investment, or student engagement and interest in the text. Another short program could be, for example, students starting with the simple English, reading for comprehension. Then, taking the standardized Japanese, they read just a short selection, locate that text in the simple English that they read before, and translate the standardized Japanese into English. Now, the standardized Japanese would be more complex than the simple English, so it's not a one-to-one translation. And then in the third step, they would then scan the marked English story for the part that they translated and compare their translation to the marked English translation by the researchers. And so here you have a kind of gradual leveling up of intensity and engagement with the texts. In Megumi's program, sample program, students might start with listening in Japanese, but answering comprehension questions in English, or answering questions in English. Then listening in Japanese, listening in English, and finding correspondences between the two listening programs that they did. Then maybe reading in standardized Japanese to shore up their overall knowledge and start, say, second or third order thinking about the texts, and then going back to the oral English to complete the listening exercises, and then having a culmination where they address what they learned in step 3 using the skills that they learned in steps 2 and 4. So this is obviously the speaking and listening assignment here. Okay, I know we flew through this really, really quickly. I apologize for speaking so quickly, but what I want to do now is, hopefully this will be interesting, I hope, hopefully you have an idea of what we're looking at. I want to send you all to breakout rooms, and I will give you a link in each of the breakout rooms to a Google slide like this. And I'm curious, for all of your different interests and specialties, specializations in your own education and research, how would you design a research program for this set of texts? So I'll send you to the breakout rooms, and then Megumi and I will kind of go in and out of these rooms so we can hear what you're talking about. And I think we can give you about 15 minutes to fill out these Google slides, and then we'll have the 10 or 15 minutes for discussion in the end, where we'll share, and we'll hopefully everyone will have interesting things to talk with each other. Are there any questions before I send you to the breakout rooms? You can turn on your microphone. Anything unclear?
I'm okay.
You're okay. Oh, that's better than my students. My students just never give any kind of feedback there. All right, so I'll send you out to random breakout rooms. Thank you very much. And I will pop in and give you the Google slide link. So we're going to 4 breakout rooms. Random. All right, I'll see you in a minute. Do I have to start the sessions?
I think I might pause the recording here because because I'm the host, the camera will just follow me around.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
I don't know what happens in that case, but yeah.
Actually, Jacob, when you leave and join a breakout room, it'll automatically pause the recording.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Oh, and it looks like everyone else is already in their rooms. So the hosts need to open up the breakout room tab and go to do the Sanka button or the participate button themselves.
Okay. Which one should I go to?
It's your name is already in there. It should be. Well, you go to any room.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. It's fine. I will go to this one.
Oh, wow. Oh, Jacob's in here too. So we've got maybe three people here.
Yeah, I think Catherine's in this room too, but she hasn't.
Okay.
She just hasn't joined yet.
Right on.
It's recording us though. It's totally recording us. It says it's in progress.
To see maybe
Okay.
like when you close a breakout room, that's been my experience. I feel like on Zoom, maybe it's hard for them to see. They can't really see the time limit or anything.
Yeah, we use Microsoft Teams at Hirodai, which is, I mean, I don't know, it's probably objectively better, but I'm just more used to it. 13 people, I think, is that everyone?
Yeah, it should be everyone.
Okay, so thank you everyone for your cooperation with this this experiment. I know it was a little bit confusing for some of you, but I'm sharing my screen here. I thought we could go through all the different groups and see what they put together, and have someone just talk us through your thought process and what you wound up developing for us. And then we can see what everyone has to say. So how about room one? Who developed this one?
That was
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That was you.
How did I?
No.
Go ahead, Simone.
Oh no, it's okay. Well, basically we were a little confused at the beginning, but that's because I walked into the breakout room like unprepared, but we saved it.
Me too.
We saved it. It
We
was
saved
fine. It was okay. So we were thinking kind of our idea was to start with the simple English text. You know, students can kind of read the text, answer some basic comprehension questions. How much do they kind of understand from the simple English text, you know? So there, I mean, and then we move on to the standard Japanese text. You're checking understanding, checking your answers. So now we understand the story. We all have a basic, you know, understanding of what we're supposed to be doing or what the story is all about. So it's kind of easier to transition to the dialect. And then we decided that maybe the next would be to move on to the dialect, analyzing the differences between dialect and standard Japanese. And then finally, our last step would be the dialect, the Japanese dialect to the oral English, you know, translation practice for oral storytelling and comprehension of dialects, that sort of thing. And our goals and results and our thoughts, right? Like as we said, you know, we began with the standard English to see what we know and what we can do first, which I kind of thought was kind of nice. Understand the differences between standard language and dialects. We want to be able to translate oral dialects into the language too, right? And this was kind of like my idea, and I'm not sure where I'm really going with this, but is there some observation that can be made about oral storytelling versus reading a story on a page? Can we find the same thing? Can the same thing be found in Japanese oral storytelling versus written storytelling? I know I've got this bee in my bonnet about like one is being spoken and one is being written, and like what's different about those two activities? Like what's different about that? I don't know. There might be something important. So did you have anything to add? Please do.
No, that was great. Yeah, I captured everything we were talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I like what this hits on. Actually, in my class, when I had the students read the marked English, I specifically had them comment on anything they noticed about the linguistic style or the type of language. And because it's so extreme, using non-standard vocabulary, using strange grammatical inversions and things like that, the students became much more cognizant of the linguistic difference, and they started to think about style, and that they were able to comment on that. Yeah, so I really like that idea. And also looking for differences in the oral versus written storytelling. Of course, bearing in mind that these are transcriptions of spoken stories. So it's not written composition, it's transcription of speech. So it's not exactly the same thing, but there are plenty of examples of written folktales that we could also look for comparison. Maybe
so
that's.
I imagine your students are like listening to the stories, right?
Well, in the one example that Megumi talked about, they only read. They did not listen at all, and they only read in English.
Huh. Oh, I see. I guess
But that's why we're trying to find ways to incorporate more types of texts, because that's just not enough, right?
I would want to hear it because there's something so like, yeah, like listening to like a folk tale, like, or you know, I haven't really heard that many in English, to be honest. I prefer Japanese because I'm really interested in local culture, but like listening to, like, even if you don't understand the dialect, like the rhythm of the speaking is such an important part of the story. So
yeah,
interesting.
And I think
Absolutely.
listening it provides a more visceral experience to the story.
Yeah. It's a really different thing, maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool.
We'll bear that in mind. Maybe for time's sake, we should move on to room number 2, who took a little different approach. Who was in room number 2? Can you talk about your thought process here?
Well, there's 4 of us and we kind of winged it. I'm not for sure who wants to okay, so our idea is we want to keep the same theme. Someone else can jump in anytime because I'm.
Do you want me to? Since you guys did the typing, should I do the talking?
I love that idea.
Okay. So the four of us have very different sort of teaching context, and we went with the idea of Huckleberry Finn because that book uses the vernacular a lot. And then so we just sort of had the different steps of what students could do with that sort of text, starting with like listening, answering comprehension questions, and then moving up to like a summary, and then quizzing each other, opinions, checking, peer. Step 5 would be like peer learning, peer evaluations, and then our sort of last would be of making like something like a Flipgrid video as an oral book report, and as a capstone, the students could make their own short story or skit and possibly act it out. So
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. Thank you.
yeah,
I'm
it was a lot. Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you obviously you chose Huckleberry Finn because of the vernacular language element. Is there a way that you you would kind of activate that the specificity of that language in your? Did you talk about that at all? Like why?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of skipped over. Sorry, we skipped over the localization part of it. Yeah. We were going at it more from I guess from what listening, like kind of receptive into productive. Yeah, we skipped over the localization part of it. I can tell you from experience, I said it in the breakout room as well. I learned a lot about Japanese culture and just by reading a lot of, of course, down here in Iwate, we have kappa, the kappa stories. Yeah, and so I really enjoy reading those stories, and so, but we did skip over that in this in this lesson plan.
Is that Tono stories? Tono.
Yeah, that's it. Tono.
Wow.
Yeah, reading those stories, and those are very interesting.
Yeah.
I had a chance to go kappa fishing in Tono, and if you go kappa fishing in Tono, seriously, they have volunteers that come down to the river and tell you the story of kappa in like the Tono band. It's like lovely. Like, of course, I only understand like the very basics of the story because it's all in like some kind of dialect, but it really like you can like it's a very nice experience to hear like Japanese stories in Japanese.
And definitely interesting. The interest level comes out a lot. I don't know how much you have to actually rely on learning vernacular to pull interest level from the students. I think you could put it in a standard Japanese. I don't know. That would be a research topic onto itself. Just standardizing the Japanese so it's more inclusive of everyone. But
I think I understand that approach, and that's why we have the standardized Japanese translations. What we were kind of hoping for here is to try to find see if we can find a use for moving between these different types of texts. So in your case, I might say, is there a positive outcome, or is there a benefit for starting out with a Huck Finn graded reader, and then moving on to the original, right? That's similar to what we're talking about, is where you have different intralingual translations, or they read in Japanese first and then they read in English. Because the extent that I've been working on this project, I haven't found any research programs about this type of translation yet in EFL. Yeah. All right, thank you. I don't want to take up too much time. There's some chats going on too. That would be fun. People like this. Soon you said volunteers. Oh yeah, I thought they were going to be volunteer dressed up as kappa, fishing for the volunteers there. Okay, let's move on to room number 3. Can we do that? Who wrote for this?
Sorry, that was us. Feel free to jump in with my partner there whenever you like. We kind of compromised because I'm an ALT. I've taught for the past 18 years in elementary school and junior high and sometimes high school. And I believe my partner in the past has taught high school, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so we decided to compromise, and this is based on a project that I had already done 2 or 3 years ago in one of my junior high schools. We took 3 kamishibai stories, local folklore stories in my little town here. I'm in Iwate as well. And what we did was, first of all, the students knew the stories. We read them in Japanese together to familiarize ourselves with them. So that would be step 1. The students get up to speed with each story. One was a story about 2 famous sumo wrestlers during the Boshin War. Another one was a story of, I can't remember all 3 of the stories offhand. I've got them in the back, but the point is we started in standard Japanese. There was no accent or hogen or on them. There might have been, but the version I read did not have it. And then what we did was we went from there. The principal and I translated them best we could into English, and a simple, smooth English. So marked English, and then I guess I could put a little arrow there calling it simple English, because it's elementary school students, we wanted to make it as simple as possible for them to understand and read. And then the last part of the project was I went to a sound studio in Morioka and recorded these things on a CD, and then the students drew pictures of them. That's something I left out of this. And then the students presented them in English with my help during the Gakushu Happyokai. And what I took away from this, at least some of the benefits I took away from this, was that the students could see their familiar stories in English and practice reciting them without necessarily having to go through the translation process themselves, because it was beyond the scope of the project. I could see a situation doing a similar thing in higher levels where the students could actually have a hand in the translations themselves, possibly high school. But I found that having original Japanese folklore texts like these really helped the students see what they could do with even just speaking them in English. So, and this was at the elementary school level, not the university or high school level. So, did you want to add anything? I asked my partner if she wanted to add anything else.
That sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, I like this idea, and I think like you say, it works in such an elementary level environment with the repetition, right? One of my other interlocutors, he used storybooks in elementary school and building different activities, reading the same story 8 times, 9 times over the course of an activity. And this was one of his projects years ago. And I think that there's something similar to this. It's starting with the Japanese or starting with the familiar story, you're activating these schema that are the kind of the backbone of the student's comprehension, right? And so they're using that to navigate the unfamiliar language. And so, yeah, I think this is a really interesting project.
Can I try this because we have an ongoing high school student project right now in Hirosaki University. So I'd like to try this idea from room 1.
Yeah, can we steal this from you?
Well, it wasn't my idea. It was actually the principal's idea. I just went along with it, but I liked it so much. I went all in. So.
Yeah. And with Kamishibai, you also have a picture that helps scaffold the experience too.
That's right. I'm saying go for it. I don't think any one person invented this concept, and you can take it any way you want, right? And the most important thing was that it was local stories that the students themselves were familiar with, and that's what made it really interesting.
Yeah. I think we're touching on the same thing. The hosts are going to kill us because we've gone so far over. Let's just hear from the last group, if that's okay.
Okay, Vicky, do you mind if I go through this one?
No, go for it.
So Vicky and I, we actually teach at the same university, and I'll turn my camera on. We actually work at the same university, and at our university, we get a lot of Aomori students, but also students from outside the prefecture as well. So all the way down in Kagoshima, Okinawa, from all over Japan. So our original thought was that we'd look at the reading and listening to the Japanese dialect, and having the students in groups, so mixed, native Tsugaru people and non-native Tsugaru people, so that they can actually understand the story. They've real Tsugaru people there to help them translate and, kind of get an understanding in standard Japanese. And then maybe get it into standard English, how would they write that into, some simple English, and maybe share their English stories in different groups there as well. And then, compare what they've made with the marked English, how does the storytelling, how they tell the stories, what differences can you see there? And then from there, Vicky and I thought it'd be kind of interesting if, students from the other parts of Japan could talk about stories in their own dialects. Do similar stories exist in their own dialects? Like you gave the example of the ogre on the mountain. So do other places which have mountains also have similar stories? And, they could share those stories, and kind of as a final activity, they could choose one of those stories from a different dialect and, do a bit of a presentation about it to a different group there. I mean, in English. It would require a lot of management of, who's in which group, because you'd have to manage the different dialects and things there. But we thought, it'd be a good opportunity to sort of talk about Japanese culture in English.
And cultural differences in Japanese cultural differences.
Yes.
And also they have got 2 English speaking practices in this entire activity. So they get to work on working on putting 2 stories into English rather than one. The one's from Suguru Ben, and then the second one would be from a different Japanese dialect.
And I really, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I really like that idea, because even though Hirodai really focuses on, we want to teach local stuff, I have to, it's very difficult every year trying to beat into my students' heads that Japan is not a monolith, right? They always say Japanese people like X, Japanese people do Y. And by having them actively sharing things from their own different backgrounds, I think that's useful. That's really helpful in that aspect. The textual comparison too, some of the other groups mentioned this. That's again, that's exactly what we're looking for, is how can the students be learning about differences in language, differences in style, by looking at these different texts.
But I actually do an activity in my classes where we look at the different cultures in Japan, and I get the students from outside Aomori to talk about the things that they surprise them, and the people in Aomori get surprised that that's not the norm. And that's kind of where I like to go with culture. So I really like this idea of using the Tsugaru dialect stories. I thought it was very interesting indeed, and they're really heavy Tsugaru-ben as well. I just saw them quickly on the screen there, but I don't know, that'd be quite fun.
I want to try this.
Yeah, so I should say we have permission to use the text in any way that we like. So if you'd like a sample, let me do this. I'll just put in chat. Here's our email addresses, and you can contact us, and we're happy to send out a portion of our text so you can take a look, and you can criticize our translations and everything. We'd be happy to share that with you. It'd be unfair for us to keep this all to ourselves. So again, we've gone really over time, so I want to thank everyone for their cooperation and their interesting ideas. I think Megumi and I have a lot to chew over with all of this. Maybe yeah, okay, so I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to go overboard. So let me just say thank you on behalf of Megumi and myself. Thank you all for your active participation, and I'll hand it back to the event coordinators to do their.
Thank you for sharing it.
If I can get my camera to stop fading out, this is the book that Joshua, Megumi, and others from Hirodai had written using Tsugaru stories in it.
Yeah, so that's all about learning English through local Hirosaki City places and culture and food and all the little kind of boring things that don't appear in the tourism guides, right? So what do the people buy in the supermarket kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting book. So yeah, definitely check it out if you have a chance.
Yeah, if
I'm
you're
not
interested
sure-
in that, we can send a PDF to you for free. We're happy to do that.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
like, oh, sorry, Otto.
no, I was going to say, if you want to share if it's convenient, you can share the PDF in the chat window, and everyone can download it from there.
Okay, well, just give me a couple of minutes
Yeah,
to
well,
find it.
no
but
hurry
yeah.
right now. We still have plenty of time. So I would like to bring us to a close there. We have gone a little bit over. So let's take a short break, 5 minutes, come back at 4:40. And then we'll go into some discussions. We can also ask questions after that. Before we go to a break, how about a round of applause for Megumi and Joshua? Thank you very much.